Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Melissa Siegel. I'm a professor of migration studies, and this is a channel about all things migration. And today we're going to continue with our migration snapshot series, where we dig deep into one specific country, looking at their migration situation, particularly a country in Europe. And we do this using the European Commission's Knowledge Center on Migration and Demography's Atlas of Migration. And today we're going to be looking at Finland. So we're going to be doing a deep dive into Finland, looking at the population of immigrants and immigrants, residence permits issued, asylum applications. We'll even look at one measure of irregular migration. We'll also look at citizenship and naturalization, as well as some indicators of social cohesion, as well as education and employment. Now let's jump right in and get started with looking at the population of Finland today. So the population of Finland, at least in 2020, was around 5.5 million people. And of that, close to 5% of the population is a non-citizen. So at least this is one definition of an immigrant that some countries use. And if we break this down by people who are coming from within the EU and outside of the EU, we can see that non-EU citizens make up around 3% of the population, whereas EU citizens make up close to 2% of the population. Now that is stocks in 2020. If we look at flows, we see a slightly different story. So here we can look at flows in 2018. And if you're interested in more on the differences between migrant stocks and migrant flows, you can check my video out on that here. I'll also make sure to link it down in the description below. But in general, a stock of immigrants is the current number of total immigrants in the country in a given year, whereas the flows of immigrants are the number of immigrants that came into the country or people that left the country in a specific year. So here, if we look at the annual flows in 2018, we can see that around 31,000 people entered the country, split pretty evenly between EU and non-EU citizens. And if we look at the people who left the country in that year, we see around 19,000 people left Finland in 2018, with around 2/3 of those coming from going to within the EU and around 1/3 going outside of the EU. Now, if we look at residence permits issued in Finland, we can see residence permits issued between 2017 and 2020. And what you can see here is there is quite a mix of residence permits that are issued because of work, because of family reasons, so family reunification or family formation, education, and then other reasons. And other reasons could be things like asylum or refugee status. If you look at the valid residence permits at the end of the year in 2020, you can see that the majority of these, or at least 40% of these, are for family reasons, while 23% are for work reasons and 31% for other reasons, and then a minority of that for educational purposes. Now, actually, if we look at asylum claims, or at least first instance asylum claims, in between 2017 and 2020, you can see that the majority of the applications are put in by men compared to women. And if we look at the first instance decisions, you can see that around half, well, anywhere between 46% and 62% between 2017 and 2020 were actually rejected. With those that were accepted, mainly being accepted on grounds of the Geneva Convention, also known as the Refugee Convention, but some others based on subsidiary protection or humanitarian decisions. Now, we can also look at one measure of irregular migration, and we can do that by looking at the number of people who are ordered to leave a country in a given year compared to the number of people that actually leave. So in Finland, we can see that the rate of people actually returning or leaving the country is somewhere between 40 and 50% between 2017 and 2020. And what that means is that the people who did not leave generally end up in some kind of irregular status, so we can take this as one measure of irregular migration. Now let's look at naturalization and citizenship. What we can see here is similar to many other European countries, we see a higher rate of citizenship acquisition of non-EU citizens. And that is because EU citizens in general have very similar rights as Finns in the country. So the benefits for them to actually gain citizenship are much less than someone coming from outside of the EU. Now, what we can also see here is that around 7 to 9% of the eligible population is actually gaining citizenship in any given year. And you can see this between 2016 and 2019, but again, higher rates among non-EU citizens. Now we can look at some possible indicators of social inclusion. And the first one I'm going to look at here is median income. If we look at median income, we can see that nationals on average have higher incomes than EU immigrants and non-EU immigrants, with non-EU immigrants having the lowest income of the three groups. If we look at overcrowding rates and if we look at risks of poverty and social exclusion, we also see that the lowest risks of overcrowding and poverty are amongst nationals, with the highest risk of overcrowding and poverty amongst non-EU nationals and immigrants in general. But there's not as big of a difference between EU nationals and nationals as compared to non-EU nationals. Now, if we look at the population by educational attainment, what we can see is that on average, nationals have higher levels of education compared to EU immigrants and non-EU immigrants, although EU immigrants and non-EU immigrants don't look very different with regard to their education profiles, with around 30%, 31% having high levels of education, then close to 40% having medium levels of education, and close to 30% having lower levels of education. Now, if we look at employment rates, what we see is that in general, locals have, or nationals have higher rates of employment than non-nationals, with European nationals having better rates of employment than non-EU nationals. And if we look at this by education level, what we can actually see is that European immigrants with low education levels in Finland actually have much better labor market outcomes, or at least employment rates, than both nationals and non-EU immigrants. If we look at medium levels of education here, again, we see EU immigrants performing a bit better, particularly females performing a bit better with regard to employment rates. And if we look at high levels of education here, we don't see as large of differences between nationals and EU nationals, but we do see that non-EU nationals, particularly women in this case, don't have as high employment rates. Now, I hope that just gave you a quick look at the situation in Finland today. If you're interested in snapshots on other countries in the EU, you can check those out here. I'll link the playlist here and make sure to put it in the description below. If you like this video, of course, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos that I upload every week. And I do hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.